that the earlier we get little ones chewing, the less likely they are to actually be picky eaters in toddlerhood, which is something that parents are trying to avoid. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start with baby-led weaning to achieve that goal of not having a picky eater. And that's really something important to point out.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Christa Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together. Today on The Less Stressed Life, I have Jordyn Koveleski Gorman, who is a licensed speech language pathologist, feeding specialist, and the founder of Eat, Play, Say, an online resource hub for parents who want clear, expert-backed answers about speech, feeding, and play development. With nearly a decade of clinical experience, Jordyn leads a team of pediatric specialists serving over 700,000 followers and a community of parents around the world. Eat, Play, Say has collaborated with companies like Layla, ByHeart, Primally Peer, and Little Spoon, and continues to expand its offerings from digital playbooks and developmental handbooks to consultations. As a mom of two, she knows what it's like to Google everything and created Eat, Play, Say so you don't have to. Welcome to the show, Jordyn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Okay, we were just talking offline about how your oldest is 4 and you got another one on the way. And so things are busy at your home. And I'm curious how all of this happened, like why you decided, wow, I am going to put all of this stuff out into the universe. Like, where did you start as a speech language pathologist, Jordyn, to what is some of the origin story of how we got here?
Yeah, no, great question. So I have always worked with infants and toddlers since I came out of grad school. And I was like a play-based therapist to start. Worked at a really small clinic and nobody was a feeding specialist. And we had so many little ones come in with difficulty starting solids, battles, picky eating. So I decided to take all this extra coursework while I was there, became a feeding specialist over a few years, and then transitioned into my dream job, working at a rehabilitation hospital for little ones who had feeding difficulties. Had my son, was all set on going back to work, realized I couldn't leave him. I wanted to be with him. I needed to find something else. And being a mom was really what I wanted to do, but I still had this passion for providing parents with education.
Mm-hmm.
So I started sharing things on social media, and little by little, it just blew up. I was like, oh my gosh, this could be a business. Like I can reach so many more people. So little by little, I grew Eat, Play, Say, started building my team, registered dietitian, lactation consultants, OT, PT, and we've become this powerhouse of specialists that are helping parents all over. And I have my dream job of being a mom and my dream job of educating about speech and feeding with my team.
I love that story. I love anytime people are enjoying their life and doing their zone of hopefully genius more so than excellence. I love this. I don't know if you ever heard this before. I interviewed the guy who wrote the book about this. I think his name is Gay. I forgot his name, but he wrote The Big Leap. Gay Hendricks. And he always talks about how people can die in their zone of excellence. It's half sad. Or they can have their zone of genius, which doesn't really feel like work. And so I always think about that kind of in the background quite often when I'm going through life or interviewing people. So let's talk about what were some of the things that happened even in your own parenting journey that started to be really supportive in how you were supporting other parents? For example, one of the things we might want to talk about a little bit is the transition from breastfeeding to formula feeding, for example. So can you tell us about any of these things along the parenting journey that have really helped you do your job better?
Yeah, I think my business really started to take off when I had my second. So I have a daughter, Penelope, she's 2. And while my kids look identical, I have a boy and a girl, they are 2 completely different children. And that gives you such a good perspective as a professional because all of the recommendations that you have given pre-kids, that you have a kid and then you have a completely different kid, you have a great understanding for how things can be different. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong. they're just different. So my first, I had breastfeeding difficulties. He ended up having torticollis, a lot of motor difficulties. So formula ended up being the right choice for us to get him fed, where my daughter was actually exclusively nursed for 21 months, which is completely different. And I have taken those journeys and been able to explain to parents, give them the facts about feeding your little one, making the choice that's best for you without shame, because I don't have shame in either way that I fed my children. And I know that there can be a lot of feelings around feeding, sleep, and politics with parents. Those are like the three big triggers. So I'm glad that I was able to have those different journeys because it made me a better professional and also just made me able to reach my audience so much better. And I'm thankful for both experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so talking about you with this background of being an SLP, I think about you being a feeding expert around some of these oral motor things. And you were sharing offline that as you started to build your team, you added a dietitian, and we just have such very complementary skill sets, to be honest. But I want to really talk about some things that I feel like a speech language therapist is a little bit more of an expert about, which is some of these concepts around things that babies gravitate to or not gravitate to. But let's start with baby-led weaning, the conversation about that. First of all, I have to paint the picture. We need to paint the picture of what is baby-led weaning, what are the recommendations for solids, etc. First of all.
Yeah. So, the definition of baby-led weaning has changed over the years. The initial definition was like no purees, no spoons, all hands, all whole foods. You don't modify them at all for baby. But actually, over the years, it's changed a little bit to basically meaning that baby self-feeds foods that you don't modify. So you can still use purees that are naturally occurring, yogurt, applesauce, but you can also give a chicken leg to your 6-month-old and they can hold it and eat it. And the whole point is to watch baby's cues and let them completely take the lead. That is essentially what baby-led weaning is.
Yeah, this is interesting. I remember my oldest is 20. And so I felt like those days, it was definitely giving your kid pureed baby food out of a jar. And I don't really remember after that. It's a blur. I don't remember what happened after that for my next children. And so when did this overall conversation shift? Is this like a very popular, is this the recommendation? What is the landscape of current pediatric feeding?
Yeah, it's new in the last decade. And I really feel like in the last 5 years, I even feel like since COVID, where social media blew up and everybody started really talking about baby-led weaning, it became a thing. A lot of practitioners, like medical practitioners, pediatricians, are still very hesitant about it because the thought of giving a 6-month-old a chicken leg is a little scary, especially for some parents, especially practitioners. But there is some research to support that giving little ones soft, whole foods is not more of a choking risk than giving them purees. And there's research to support that the earlier we get little ones chewing, the less likely they are to actually be picky eaters in toddlerhood, which is something that parents are trying to avoid. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start with baby-led weaning to achieve that goal of not having a picky eater. And that's really something important to point out.
Yeah. Okay. So if you were having a baby, which is true, what approach would you take? Puree, baby-led weaning, combo? And I also want to comment, it makes sense that practitioners, maybe since you gave that timeline, it takes a long time sometimes for what is new to become mainstream. So that's interesting. And I'd had clients mention what they were doing, but ultimately it's however you want to start, because there's all this, I felt like there was always this noise around start feeding your kid at 4 months or 6 months or whatever. And I was like, I don't know. I just feel like they change it all the time. And you're somewhat validating that a little bit, that it has changed in this last decade.
Yes, it has. And the AP right now is like the gold standard of what parents are supposed to look towards. But it's funny because the AP will say around 6 months of age is when little ones are ready to start solid. They should be sitting up at least with support. Sitting up without support is preferred so that they can use their hands to self-feed themselves. But then you hear from parents saying, my pediatrician at my 4-month appointment said we're good to go start with rice cereal. So you're right. That is really not translating to a lot of pediatricians trickling down. And then parents go to social media and they see a 6-month-old eating pancakes and they're like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Yeah. So it's really tricky. So at ePlace A and with both my kids, I've done a combination approach. Purees are the safest texture to give your little one. There is the least amount of risk for choking. But we know from that research, we do want littles to try to be mashing and chewing quickly. So we don't just want to stay on purees. So I always recommend parents give mashed down avocado with a whole slice of avocado, mashed down banana with a whole slice of banana, and always have multiple textures present and see what your baby will gravitate towards.
Yeah. You know what I think about this? It feels fun. And so I think we always have the opportunity to think, oh, this feels overwhelming. Like I've got to do two things. Or it could just feel fun to see, I wonder which one my kid's going to go for, right? That's how it feels to me. I never even would have thought about this concept. I feel like I was in survival mode when my kids were little and I was just feeding them or giving them things. But also when it's not your first kid, I don't know about you, but I feel like you become much more relaxed after the first one. You're like, here, try this.
I had a meal plan for my first one, and my second one, I was like, what's right? What is soft? What do I have in my pantry? They're going to have this today.
Right. You can just eat what I'm eating, or it appears you're hungry. Here is some berries. Like here is, same thing. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about picky eating, but on that similar note, so some kids might go for this whole food versus mashed food, but then there's other feeding things that come up. So do some kids resist salads and not want to eat at all for a long time? What happens next if feeding is not going well? What are some of the things that happen?
It is hot weather season, and there is probably no better time than now to make electrolytes part of your daily routine. Electrolytes help you make energy and help get hydration into the cell so you aren't just peeing out what you put in. I've been drinking electrolytes for at least 5 years, and I'm always looking for a great tasting, high quality powder just to change up the flavors. This summer, I'm doing a lot of Electrolyte Supreme from Jigsaw. It's got a great complementary vitamin and mineral profile beyond the classic electrolyte minerals of potassium, sodium, and magnesium without any sugar or artificial colors. It tastes great, and it's probably my go-to for my kids, especially the lemon lime flavor as a hydrating lemonade for summer. You can get 10% off every single order at jigsawhealth.com with the code LESSSTRESSED10. That's less stress 10 to take 10% off of all of Jigsaw's incredible products, from Electrolyte Supreme to potassium and adrenal cocktails to cod liver oil and beyond. So go get yourself now and start hydrating.
Yeah. So we have to remember that it's a brand new sensory experience for kids, right? They've only had formula or breast milk, a bottle nipple or mom's nipple in their mouth. And now they're getting all of these tastes and textures that they've never experienced before. And some research has even said that it can take 100 presentations of a food for a little one to accept it, which is super overwhelming when you're like, they're supposed to eat 100 foods before one, apparently. Like, how am I supposed to do this? Giving little ones time to explore the food, stick their hands in it, don't be shoving the food in their mouth, all of those things, so that they can go at their own pace. If you're seeing resistance, that is sometimes very normal. Gagging is normal, right? Their gag reflex is so forward in their mouth. And what pushes their gag reflex back is their hands in their mouth, teethers in their mouth, and food in their mouth. So that means in order to get through the gagging, we have to give them foods to gag on, which is a weird concept, but it is normal.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So are there any other reasons that babies would avoid solids? Let's say you put stuff on your baby's tray and you started at 6 months and 2 months later, your baby is still has no interest at all in this food.
Yeah, it could be a few things. They go through teething stages too, where they're just like not in it. Sometimes little ones start out strong, then all of a sudden they're having some type of regression, teething, they had a bad experience with the food and they're remembering that and they don't want to try it again. There's ups and downs with everything feeding, just like there's ups and downs with sleep. There's ups and downs with mood, with everything. So we typically aren't really concerned, oh my gosh, there's a feeding problem, unless they've eliminated every food they've tried, or they're only really eating 1 to 5 foods when before they were eating 20 to 25 foods. And I know it can be really overwhelming, especially as parents watch social media or they see this 8-month-old devour a big plate with all of these perfectly curated foods on it. But there is a little bit of normalcy with that. I always recommend to parents to try to get your little one involved in the kitchen outside of the high chair so that there's not always a pressure to eat food when you're around food. That also can really help with picky eating because littles have that awareness of food exists, not when I'm just in a high chair where maybe I don't want to eat it.
I think that's actually a really interesting concept because I would love to talk to you more a little bit about picky eating, and I'm going to frame it up a little bit differently. But I love this concept, so I want to underline it. Helping in the kitchen, because then we do not associate food with automatically eating. So it's just, which is just interesting because something I've thought about over the years is just unconscious eating patterns, right? Grazing, just because we're around it, is just completely unconscious, which is its own food relationship issue in a way, right? Where we're just not being super conscious. So that's an interesting spin on that topic. I like it. No one's ever said it that way before, to me anyway. Okay, so I want to talk about healthy food relationships because I think that's a precursor to picky eating potentially. The first thing you said was don't force food in baby's mouth, which I definitely have flashbacks to that for my oldest child. That was just how I feel like that was what you did when you were feeding them puree. So let's talk about what are some of the things that parents can do to start to foster a healthy relationship with food in their children.
Yeah. So talking about the profile or like the texture or the adjectives of food in a very neutral way. So little ones, especially the first time that they are getting introduced to food from infancy, even in toddlerhood, they're starting to categorize foods in their brain. This is a breakfast food. I eat these foods for breakfast. And it's happening like subconsciously. These are foods I have for snack. These are foods that mom offers at dinner time. So if we start to associate this is a good food or this is a bad food, they're going to start to have those feelings towards those foods. So instead, we say things if a little one doesn't like that food, instead of saying, oh, was that yucky? Was that gross? Because now they're going to think, okay, spinach is horrible. It's gross. Mommy said it was yucky. I didn't like it. You could say, oh, was that a lot of food? Was that squishy? Let's do a little bit. Let's do a little bit of food. Or let's add something to it so it's a little more crumbly or something else. Let's just talk about the texture of the food and not put a positive or a negative like qualifier on it. And instead of saying, oh, you liked this last time. This was yummy last time. Say, wow, that was a great bite. It's so tasty, something like that. So it's not good or bad.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like all of this leads up to picky eating in general. But what I will say first is a million years ago, more than a decade, I feel like it was more than a decade ago, there was changes in the school nutrition program nationally and then statewide. And back in those days, I was contracted to go review school food service programs and lunch programs. And the takeaway is that the lunch program was as good or as awesome or as robust as the person leading it. Not shocking. And what I remember about that is as you describe food, I've shrouded myself from being around people saying things like, oh, this is disgusting. But that would be things I would hear when I would go into schools, right? That sometimes the staff would be like, oh, that is so gross. And of course, the same, it was just funny. How were you going? Because the concept at that time was, let's get dark green vegetables in, let's get red orange vegetables in, let's get some beans in, et cetera. And so these were sometimes either the school was already doing this or they weren't because of the people running it were like, that's disgusting. And so they're projecting their stuff onto these kids. And so I only share that because that's exactly what I thought of when you were describing this stuff is, oh, yes. And don't forget the other people who are also feeding your children are projecting their stuff on them for better or for worse. But it's a good point. This is where we're also picking it up from for who knows how long, our entire life.
Exactly.
Potentially. Okay. We talked about how baby-led weaning, one of the original definitions was whole foods, etc. So let's talk about processed baby food. This is a topic of interest for you, right? What's the research show on ultra-processed baby foods and what counts as, and what are some common foods as ultra-processed baby foods and what's their role in the food landscape for kiddos?
Yeah, it's funny. I just took a walk down the baby food aisle like a few weeks ago. And basically, I guess you can qualify ultra processed baby foods. It's basically like the baby snacks, like the wafers, the puffs, to a certain extent. You have to look at what the ingredients are. And the issue with these is that there's just hidden things in there that are not necessary, especially sugar, there's a lot of added sugar in baby foods, which is funny because the AP says, no added sugar under 2. Yet almost every wafer on the market has 1 to 2 grams of added sugar in it. And it's fascinating. So these are also marketed to parents as you're in a rush, which parents are. You're in a rush. You need to get the door to daycare. You can give your little one this when they're teething. It's so good for them. But then those snacks and those things start to take place of regular foods and meals. They become something that you're reaching for every single day. And then all of a sudden, your little one's getting added sugar every day.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about the concept of snacking all day versus meals. And I feel like this is another big parent pain point that I've seen. What advice would you say to a parent whose kid just wants to snack all the time and doesn't want to eat at a mealtime?
Yeah. I talked about this before. I feel like it's really hard in the schedule for a lot of families to do the classic breakfast, lunch, dinner because of daycare drop off, sports practice for older kids, and then if you have younger kids, when are you going to feed them? So if you're stuck in this grazing snack rut, instead of flipping your whole world upside down and trying to change your schedule, which just may not be possible for you, swapping out what you're offering can be the first step. So if you're going to offer a snack, make sure that the ingredients are all whole foods, no added sugar. Pick a puff, pick a cracker, pick something that doesn't have any of those added stuff in it. Try to then pair it with the foods that are actually in it. So an example would be like getting strawberry puffs and pairing it with actual strawberries. Over time, trying to get those strawberry puffs out, give them just the strawberries. Offer a pouch and then offer thinly sliced apples if they're ready to chew that. They'll thin out the pouch, then give them just the apples and make those whole food swaps first before trying to tackle the grazing.
That's such an interesting concept. I really like it. It's also a game in my
Yes, it is.
Let's actually just give them the same thing. And it just works in the brain. Let's associate these things. And it's, okay, here's the whole version of it. I love that. I've never heard that one either. Okay, so you've got your first preschooler, you've got one in utero. So you've kind of lived through all these stages. What would you go back and tell yourself like throughout the years? What would you say to Jordyn in retrospect when your first was born about feeding?
Yeah. I wish I could tell myself before I had my first Paul that the world is going to be so noisy, telling you all of these different things that you should be doing. And it's going to feel so overwhelming, especially as we're living in this age of we have so much information, yet we feel like we actually don't have any information because it's just overwhelming. And foremost, listen to your mom gut because everything else out there is just a recommendation. It's just a suggestion, but we're built with something inside of us that knows what is right or wrong or best for our child. So take the information, but at the end of the day, focus on what you actually believe and what sits well with you. And I was able to really do that with my second, especially when she was completely different than my first. And I was like, wow, I'm so much calmer because I tried some things that worked with Paul, didn't work for her. And instead of forcing it because this is the recommendation, I just did what was best for her instead. And we were all happier.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think a lot of us come to that at some point of our journey. Okay, so you've had this online presence for a while. You have a lot of different resources. I'm curious, what is one or two or three of your most popular resources? Because that kind of tells us what people are most like yearning for.
Yeah, when we first became a team, my most popular resource was our Starting Solids Handbook. And I think it was because we talked equally about starting with purees, which a lot of parents are comfortable with, because a lot of parents aren't comfortable with baby-led weaning, and we need to be okay with that. We need to tell parents it's okay. You don't need to come out the gate with the chicken wings. Like, you can start with applesauce, you can start with mashed banana, but here's how to get up that texture hierarchy. So that resource equally supports parents regardless of how they want to start solids and helps them troubleshoot on both ways. But then recently, people have really been loving our playbooks for 0 to 3 years of age, which is just how to help your little one meet all of their milestones developmentally for speech, gross motor, and fine motor, using no special toys, only what you have at home, which is so great for parents in a pinch. Like, how do I play? What am I supposed to do? What are the milestones that are expected for my baby, toddler, and almost preschooler? So those are our two like big powerhouse resources.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite story of a parent who reached out to you around resources? I just like stories, right? And I know that you had a lot of clinical experience when you were in your dream job, but then you transitioned to online. And so I don't know what that looks like if you still communicate a lot with people, but I'd love to hear just like a fun story about feeding that is close to your heart that maybe, because I'm sure in a lot of team cultures, we like to celebrate wins of those in our community. So I'd just love to hear a story as well.
Yeah, I got an email shortly after we released. We have a starting solids handbook, and then we have a moving past purees guide, which is literally helping parents who started on purees and just got stuck. And they just cannot get to that next level and they're anxious. Their baby's gagging, etc. I got an email saying, "Thank you so much for your step-by-step breakdown for moving past purees. It was the first time my baby didn't gag and she ate something other than a smooth puree." And I could just feel like the anxiety lifting from her, like the light is here. We can get to mashed solids. We can get to chewable foods. And I love that because I know that it's so overwhelming if you just feel like developmentally your little one is stuck and you're just not sure what to do.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate being able to ask you questions that are just not my expertise in this space. We approach babies and toddlers from skin issues and sleep issues and just sort of those things from the inside out. And like I said, we're very complementary, but there are things that you guys do that I don't really touch at all related to how you touch the food and eat the food and all the picking. And there's definitely people in my realm that are specialists around that area as well. Jordyn, where can people find you online?
They can find me on Instagram. I'm most active, which is Eat, Play, Say. We also just got a brand new, beautiful website. Took almost a whole year. So eatplaysay.com is there. We have 11 free downloads. Go take something. They're so great from our whole team. And yeah, those are my two most popular places.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing that you are out there. And you know what? One really cool thing is that there are, whether we want to look at it as overwhelm or as opportunity, there's a lot of really cool resources for parents that want to do things their way. And so you provide a light for that. So I appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you. I had so much fun talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Just keep breaking.